At Morixa Tales, we believe in the power of storytelling. Our scripts weave together deep emotions and dramatic turns to deliver justice where it is most needed. Experience captivating mysteries where the truth eventually shines through, leaving a lasting impact on your heart and mind.
At my sister's wedding rehearsal dinner, she stood in front of 50 well-dressed guests, lifted her champagne glass, and smiled like she owned the world. Then she looked straight at me and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "She's just a loser. Poor and pathetic." Laughter filled the room. Pitying eyes turned toward me as if I didn't belong there. And right there in front of everyone, she told me to leave. I smiled. I didn't say a single word, because I was the only one who knew the truth they were desperately trying to bury. All I needed was one phone call. By the wedding day, everything would fall apart. Thank you so much for being here. I would really appreciate your comments below. Where are you from? And how did you find this video, through a friend's share or a YouTube recommendation? Your answers will help me better understand how to reach more people like you. A small note, this story combines fiction and real-life lessons, but the message I want to share is completely valuable. The moment my sister called me a freeloader in front of 50 wedding guests at the Summit restaurant in Vail, Colorado, on the evening of February 7th, 2025, I knew the next 72 hours would change everything. The rehearsal dinner glittered around me like a scene from a magazine I could never afford to buy, or so everyone believed. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Rocky Mountains under a violet twilight. Snow fell in lazy spirals outside, collecting on pine branches, and the edges of the terrace where outdoor heaters glowed orange against the cold. Crystal chandeliers threw shards of light across white linen tablecloths, set with gold-rimmed china and silverware that caught the flicker of a dozen candles. Each place setting had a small card with the guest's name written in elegant calligraphy. Mine was tucked at the far end of the table, as far from the bride and groom as physically possible, without leaving the room entirely. The air smelled of rosemary, seared prime rib, and money, so much money it made my stomach twist. Not from envy, from anger. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, dressed in a simple black shift from H&M that I'd owned for 3 years. My jewelry was minimal small silver hoops, a delicate chain my grandmother Helena had given me before she died 5 years ago. The chain was real 14-karat gold and heirloom, but no one here would know that. I looked like what everyone assumed. I was the struggling older sister who could barely scrape together rent, let alone afford a weekend at a 5-star Colorado resort. Savannah sat at the head of the table in an ivory Carolina Herrera gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She was 28, blonde, and glowing with the kind of confidence that came from never doubting you were the center of the universe. Her left hand rested on Noah Huntington's arm, her engagement ring catching the light, a flawless 3-carat diamond set in platinum. She tilted her head and laughed at something one of the bridesmaids said, her voice carrying across the room like wind chimes. Noah was 32, handsome in that polished prep school way, dark suit, tailored to perfection hair, styled just enough to look effortless, a smile that belonged on a yacht club brochure. He looked at Savannah like she'd personally hung the moon and every star around it. Poor bastard had no idea what he was marrying into. Beside Noah sat his father, Robert Huntington. 58 years old, silver hair swept back from a sharp, angular face, eyes the color of steel. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than a used car. When his gaze had swept over me earlier during cocktail hour, I'd felt it like a blade, cold, assessing, dismissive. He'd looked at me the way you'd look at a stray dog wandering into a country club, mildly irritated, mostly indifferent. If only he knew. The guests were a mix of Huntington family friends, old money types with summer homes in Martha's Vineyard, and Noah's college buddies from Yale. There were a few influencers Savannah had collected over the years, women with perfect skin and curated Instagram feeds. A couple of Noah's business partners, a senator I recognized from the news. Everyone radiated wealth and entitlement, the kind of people who'd never had to worry about a hospital bill or a rent increase in their entire lives. I didn't belong here. Everyone knew it. That was the point. Savannah stood tapping her champagne flute with a silver fork. The sound rang out clear and bright, cutting through the murmur of conversation. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her. I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here tonight." She began her voice warm and practiced the tone of someone who'd rehearsed this speech in front of a mirror. "This weekend means the world to Noah and me. We're so grateful to have our families and closest friends here to celebrate with us." She paused, letting her smile widen. Her eyes scanned the room and landed on me. "I especially want to thank my big sister Olivia for making the trip all the way from New Jersey." A few polite smiles turned my way. I kept my expression neutral, my hands still folded in my lap. My champagne glass sat untouched in front of me. "Olivia has been through a lot this year." Savannah continued, her tone dripping with false sympathy, the kind you'd use when talking about a sick puppy. "She's been struggling to make ends meet, and I know how hard it must be to see your little sister doing so well. But I wanted her here anyway, because family is family, right?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. A couple of guests nodded solemnly as if Savannah had just said something profound. Of course I had to help her out a little. Savannah laughed lightly as if sharing an inside joke. "I covered her travel expenses, paid for her hotel room, even bought her a dress for the wedding tomorrow because, well, she couldn't afford it herself." "But that's what sisters do, isn't it? We take care of each other." My chest tightened. Every word was a carefully placed dagger designed to humiliate, to remind everyone in this room that I was beneath them, that I was here on charity. "I just hope," Savannah said, tilting her head with that practiced look of concern, "that one day Olivia will find her own path, that she won't have to rely on handouts from family forever. Because honestly," she paused for effect, "at 34 it's time to grow up, don't you think?" A few awkward laughs scattered through the room. A couple of people looked down at their plates. One of the bridesmaids bit her lip, clearly uncomfortable. Noah shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening, but he didn't say a word. He didn't stop her. Robert Huntington's lips curled into a faint smile. He raised his glass slowly, his eyes locked on me, as if appraising a piece of furniture he decided wasn't worth the asking price. I sat perfectly still. My hands remained folded. My face gave nothing away. I'd learned a long time ago that silence was a weapon and control was power. Savannah raised her champagne flute higher. "To family," she said sweetly, her voice ringing with false affection. "To family," the room echoed. I didn't lift my glass. 20 minutes later, after the toasts were finished and the waiters began clearing plates of chocolate lava cake and espresso, Savannah appeared at my side. She leaned down her perfume, something floral and expensive, overpowering in its intensity. "You're making everyone uncomfortable," she whispered, her smile still fixed in place for the benefit of anyone watching. "Maybe it's best if you head back to your room, get some rest. Tomorrow's a big day." I looked up at her. Her smile was tight, her eyes hard as glass. "Whatever you say, Savannah," I said quietly. "Good." She straightened, smoothing her gown. "Noah's family doesn't need to see you sulking all night. This is my weekend. Don't ruin it." I stood smoothing my black dress. A few heads turned. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't make a scene. I simply walked toward the exit with my head high and my spine straight, the way my grandmother had taught me. The cold February air hit me as I stepped into the hallway. Snow was still falling outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, soft and silent, blanketing the mountains in white. The resort was quiet here, away from the laughter and clinking glasses of the dining room. I walked past the main elevators and turned down a service corridor most guests didn't even know existed. At the end of the hall was a single elevator with a brushed steel door. I pulled a key card from my purse, one that wasn't issued to ordinary guests, and swiped it through the reader. The door slid open with a whisper. I stepped inside. The panel had only 2 buttons, lobby and penthouse. I pressed penthouse. As the elevator began its silent ascent, I allowed myself a small, cold smile. 72 hours. That's all the time Savannah had left before she learned exactly who her big sister really was. 2 fingers of Maker's Mark neat. That's what I poured myself the moment I locked the penthouse door behind me and kicked off the cheap heels I'd worn downstairs. The suite was 3,000 square feet of floor-to-ceiling glass and exposed timber beams. A stone fireplace crackled in the corner, throwing amber light across hardwood floors that probably cost more per square foot than most people earned in a month. Beyond the windows, veil stretched out in every direction, white peaks against a black sky, village lights scattered like fallen stars. The penthouse occupied the resort's entire top floor, accessible only by the private elevator I'd just taken. No other guests could reach it. No one even knew it existed unless they had the right key card. It had been booked since November under the name E. Fitzgerald, my grandmother's maiden name. The one Savannah had never thought to ask about. The one Robert Huntington had forgotten 40 years ago when he'd stolen $58 million from a woman he'd assumed would never fight back. I set my glass on the marble counter and crossed to the long table I'd turned into a command center. My laptop sat open, connected to a monitor mounted on the wall. Around it, file folders, printed photographs, surveillance images, and a burner phone I used for exactly one contact. I touched the trackpad. The screen flickered to life. 3 folders stared back at me, labeled in my own handwriting 2 years ago when this plan was nothing more than rage and a hunch I couldn't prove yet. The first folder was labeled Savannah. I clicked it open. Rows of subfolders appeared, organized by date and category. Photographs of my sister entering a budget inn with Tyler Brooks 6 months ago. Bank records showing withdrawals from an account. Savannah thought I didn't know about an emergency fund my grandmother had set up decades ago. Accessible only with a passcode Helena had written in the back of an old recipe book Savannah had stolen from the estate after the funeral. $350,000. Gone. Savannah thought that account was all I had left. She thought she'd taken everything, leaving me with nothing but the clothes on my back and whatever scraps I could beg from family. That's why she'd felt so confident tonight, humiliating me in front of 50 guests. She thought she'd already won. I scrolled further. Text messages Frank Murphy had pulled from Savannah's phone records through a contact at her carrier. Savannah to Tyler, August 14th, 2024. Don't worry. The baby will have the Huntington name and the Huntington money. No one will ever know. I closed the folder and opened the second Huntington. Robert Huntington's face stared back at me from a newspaper clipping dated June 1985. The headline read, "Real estate developer accused of fraud, investor loses millions." My grandmother had been 63, then a self-made woman who'd built a modest real estate portfolio from nothing. Robert Huntington, going by Robert Hunt back then, had convinced her to invest in a luxury development project in Aspen that never existed. By the time Helena realized she'd been conned, Robert had vanished with her money. He'd resurfaced years later under his full name, clean record, new identity, untouchable. Helena had spent a decade crawling back from that loss. She'd rebuilt brick by brick, dollar by dollar, deal by deal, and she'd taught me one lesson above all others: never let them see you coming. I scrolled through the rest of the folder. Surveillance photos. Frank had taken over the past 18 months, Robert meeting with known associates of a trafficking network that stretched from Eastern Europe to Latin America. Financial records showing shell companies' offshore accounts, wire transfers linking back to operations in Prague, Mexico City, and Budapest. FBI intelligence reports I'd been feeding to Special Agent David Torres for over a year. Robert thought he was invincible. He thought marrying his son off to my sister was a stroke of luck, a connection to a family he assumed was broken and irrelevant. What he didn't know, I'd been positioning pieces on the board for 2 years. What he didn't know, I owned 40% of the resort where his son's wedding was happening. What he didn't know, the woman he'd mocked tonight over brandy and cigars, calling me that Fitzgerald girl who couldn't afford bus fare, was the same woman who'd quietly been funneling evidence to the FBI, building a case that would bury him for the rest of his life. Frank had told me last week what Robert said at the golf course. Poor thing's living off crumbs. Probably here, hoping Noah will slip her a few hundred for rent. Let him believe it. Arrogance made men careless. I opened the third folder, Operation Reckoning. A timeline stretched across the screen. 2 years of surveillance evidence collection, strategic moves, every piece of information I'd gathered, every alliance I'd built, every moment I'd spent playing the role of the struggling older sister, while quietly tightening the noose around Robert's neck and my sister's lies. At the bottom, circled in red, February 10th, 2025, wedding day. Beneath it, a single word: endgame. My burner phone buzzed on the table. I picked it up. "Murphy, it's confirmed," came the gravelly voice of Frank Murphy, the private investigator I'd hired 24 months ago. Frank was ex-NYPD, 56 years old, with a face like a bulldog and a reputation for finding things people wanted to stay buried. Savannah's 6 months pregnant. I pulled the ultrasound records from her OB in Denver. DNA came back this afternoon. Tyler Brooks is the father. 0 doubt. Does Noah know? Not a clue. She's been smart about it. Loose-fitting dresses avoided photos told him she's been stressed about wedding planning. Kid's clueless. I took a slow sip of whiskey. Good. Keep it that way until tomorrow. Torres and his team are arriving at the resort in the morning. They'll check in under aliases fake family members, out-of-town guests. Arrest warrant sealed until Saturday. The second Robert steps into that ceremony, he's finished. And the trafficking case, solid as concrete. Torres has enough to put him away for 20 years. Minimum human trafficking, conspiracy wire, fraud, money laundering. You gave them the last pieces they needed 18 months ago. This is just cleanup now. I stared at the red circle on the screen. February 10th, 3 days away. "Frank, I need to see you tomorrow morning. 10 a.m., your office." "You sure that's outside Vail, 30-minute drive?" "I need to go over the final details somewhere no one will see us. Somewhere off the resort." A pause. Then, "You got it." "I'll have everything ready." "One more thing," I said. "Robert keeps a safe in his suite. Personal documents, old files. If Noah ever went looking, kid's not the type to snoop." "Humor me." Frank grunted. "I'll keep an eye on it. If the kid goes digging, you'll know." He hung up. I set the phone down and walked to the window. Below me, the resort was dark and quiet. Somewhere in the presidential suite, Savannah was probably trying on her wedding dress again, imagining her perfect day. Somewhere else, Noah was lying in bed, maybe wondering why his fiancée had been so distant lately, maybe wondering nothing at all. And Robert Huntington was in his suite smoking a cigar, laughing about the pathetic girl from New Jersey who couldn't even afford her own hotel room. Let him laugh. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory, sharp as the day she'd said it. "When they underestimate you, Olivia, that's when you've already won." Tomorrow morning, I'd drive out to Frank's office. We'd confirm every detail, every piece of evidence, every move the FBI would make. And in 72 hours, my sister and Robert Huntington would learn exactly what it cost to steal from someone they should never have crossed. I finished my drink, turned off the monitor, and headed to bed. Outside, the snow kept falling. I needed the truth, and the truth rarely lived in hotel rooms with velvet carpets. Frank Murphy's office sat 30 minutes outside Vail, wedged between a pawn shop and a tire store. The building was 2 stories of weathered brick with a rusted fire escape. A faded sign read Murphy Investigations, discreet and reliable. Someone had spray painted over the typo years ago. Frank never fixed it. I pushed through the door at 10 a.m. sharp. A bell chimed. The office smelled like stale coffee, cigarette smoke, and old paper. Venetian blinds hung crooked over one window, slicing morning light into narrow strips. A metal desk sat buried under file folders. A filing cabinet in the corner had one drawer half-open manila folders spilling out. On the desk, a coffee maker that looked older than me, a half-empty bourbon bottle, and a laptop held together with electrical tape. Frank sat behind the desk, cigarette dangling from his lips, fingers stained yellow. He looked up. "Morning, kid." "Morning." I locked the door behind me. Frank stubbed out his cigarette and slid a manila folder across the desk. "Savannah's financials. Took 3 months to pull this clean." I opened it. Bank statements, withdrawal slips, photocopied checks. My grandmother's emergency fund, the account Helena set up in 1998, accessible only with a passcode she'd written in the back of an old Betty Crocker cookbook. Savannah found it after the funeral, rifling through boxes while I dealt with estate lawyers. Frank tapped one statement. 17 withdrawals over 2 years. Started small, 5 grand, 10 grand. Then she got bold. Last one was 50,000 2 weeks before the wedding. Total, 350,000. Every cent. I stared at the numbers. Savannah had bled that account dry thinking she was taking everything I had. She'd probably felt victorious every withdrawal, imagining me struggling to pay rent while she booked spa appointments and wedding dress fittings. She used it for the wedding, I said quietly. The Vera Wang gown, the champagne Friday night, the flowers, the photographer, the presidential suite. Frank nodded. She thought she was spending your last dime. That's why she felt comfortable humiliating you. She thought you were finished. I closed the folder. Let her keep thinking that. Frank leaned back his chair, creaking. There's more. Robert's been talking. About me. He pulled out another file and pressed play on a small recorder. Robert's voice crackled through, the Fitzgerald girl pathetic. Showed up in Target clothes, begging for scraps at her own sister's wedding. Helena's little project failed spectacularly, didn't it? All she left behind was debt and a granddaughter too stupid to know when she's beaten. Laughter in the background. Another voice, you sure she's not a problem? Robert, a problem she can't even afford bus fare. Savannah keeps her around out of pity. That girl's got nothing. Zero. She'll fade away after this weekend. The recording clicked off. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap. Inside, something cold settled into place. He really believes that, I said softly. He does. That con he pulled in '85, he thinks it destroyed your grandmother permanently. He has no idea she rebuilt. No idea about anything you've become. Good. The most dangerous enemy is the one who thinks he's already won. 3 short knocks at the back door. Pause. 2 more. Frank stood and unlocked it. Special Agent David Torres walked in. Early 40s, clean-cut, sharp eyes, jeans, black jacket boots. No visible badge, but I knew he carried. Miss Sinclair. He nodded. Agent Torres. He pulled up a folding chair. We're in position. My team checked into the resort this morning, 4 agents undercover as out-of-town family. No one suspects. And the warrant, sealed until Saturday. The second Robert signs those partnership documents at the reception we move. Trafficking, conspiracy, wire, fraud, money laundering. You gave us what we needed 18 months ago. This is execution now. I glanced at Frank, then back. What about Savannah? Torres's expression didn't change. The $350,000, that's federal wire fraud. Interstate transfer of funds under false pretenses. You file a criminal complaint after the wedding, we add her to the case. Will it stick? Absolutely. 5 to 10 years if the judge wants to make an example. I exhaled slowly. I'll file Sunday morning. One thing, Torres said. Robert needs to feel confident. If he spooks, he'll run. He's got contacts in Prague, South America, places we can't touch. He won't run. He thinks I'm nobody. Keep it that way. Frank's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then looked up, his expression shifting. Olivia. Problem. He turned his laptop around. On-screen live security feed from the resort library. Noah Huntington stood in front of an open-wall safe, pulling out old documents. Frank zoomed in. The top page had a letterhead, Helena Fitzgerald Real Estate Holdings, 1985. My pulse spiked. He found his father's safe, Frank said quietly, the old files from the con. Torres leaned forward. If he connects the dots and tells Robert, Robert disappears, I finished. He'll be on a plane to Prague before we move. I stood pulling my coat tight. I have to get back. Now. What are you going to do? Frank asked. Talk to him before he talks to his father. And if he doesn't listen? I met Frank's eyes. Then Noah becomes a liability I can't afford. I walked to the door. Torres called out, Miss Sinclair, don't compromise the operation. I didn't answer. I pushed through the door into the cold morning. 48 hours until the wedding, and now a wild card. If Noah chose his father over the truth, I'd burn him too. The resort library sat at the end of a quiet hallway on the 3rd floor, away from the noise of guests and wedding preparations. Heavy oak doors, leather-bound books lining mahogany shelves that stretched from floor to ceiling. A stone fireplace crackled softly in the corner, casting warm light across Persian rugs and high-backed chairs that looked like they belonged in an English manor. Noah Huntington stood at a reading table near the window, his back to the door. Sunlight cut through the glass, illuminating the document spread out in front of him. Yellowed pages, faded typewriter ink paper clips rusted at the edges. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The latch clicked shut behind me. Noah spun around, his hand instinctively covering the papers. When he saw me, his shoulders relaxed slightly, but his eyes stayed sharp. Olivia. Noah. We stood 10 feet apart. He was dressed casually, jeans, a navy sweater, boots, still wet from the snow outside. His hair was slightly mussed, like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked tired, worried. He glanced down at the documents, then back at me. How did you know I was here? I didn't. I walked slowly toward the table, keeping my movements deliberate, unthreatening. I came looking for a quiet place to think. Didn't expect to find you. A lie, but a smooth one. His jaw tightened. He didn't move his hand from the papers. These are my father's. I found them in his safe this morning. I gathered. You know what's in them? I stopped a few feet from the table and met his eyes. I have an idea. Silence stretched between us. The fire popped. Outside, faint laughter drifted up from the terrace where wedding guests were gathering for brunch. Noah exhaled slowly and stepped aside, revealing the documents fully. Your grandmother, Helena Fitzgerald. My father destroyed her, didn't he? I looked down at the papers, contracts, financial statements, a letter dated June 1985 on letterhead from a development company that no longer existed, and at the bottom, a photocopy of a cashier's check made out to Robert Hunt for $58 million. Yes, I said quietly. He did. Noah ran a hand through his hair. I found these by accident. I was looking for my grandfather's watch. Dad said he kept it in the safe. But when I opened it all, I found were these files. Old files he never talked about. And then I saw your grandmother's name, and He trailed off, his voice thick. What did he do to her? I crossed my arms, leaning slightly against the edge of the table. In 1985, your father convinced my grandmother to invest in a luxury real estate project in Aspen, $58 million. She was 63, self-made, cautious. But he was convincing. He had blueprints, permits, investor lists. It all looked legitimate. But it wasn't. No, the project didn't exist. By the time Helena realized she'd been conned, your father had disappeared with her money. He resurfaced years later under a different name, a clean record, untouchable. Noah stared at the papers like they were evidence of a murder. $58 million. Every penny she had. Did she... He hesitated. Did she recover? I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence sit between us, heavy and deliberate. Then she spent 10 years rebuilding, brick by brick. She never forgot what your father did, but she survived. Noah looked up at me, and for the first time I saw something crack in his expression. Guilt, confusion, anger all tangled together. Why didn't she go to the police? Why didn't she press charges? She tried. Your father had covered his tracks too well. No paper trail, no witnesses, no jurisdiction. The case went nowhere. And by the time she had the resources to fight back, the statute of limitations had run out. So he got away with it. He did. Noah turned away, pacing toward the fireplace. He braced his hands on the mantel, staring into the flames. Does Savannah know? No. Does anyone? Not many. He turned back to me, his eyes searching my face. Do you hate me for what my father did to your grandmother? I held his gaze. I don't know you well enough to hate you, Noah, but I know enough to wonder where your loyalty lies. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're standing here with evidence that your father is a criminal, and you have a choice. You can walk out that door and tell him you found these files. You can warn him, or you can sit with this and decide what kind of man you want to be. Noah's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He's my father. I know. He raised me. He put me through Yale. He built a life for our family. With stolen money. That landed like a punch. Noah flinched. You don't know that. Don't I? He stared at me, his jaw working. What do you want from me, Olivia? I want you to think, really think, about who your father is, about what he's capable of. And then I want you to decide if you're the kind of man who protects a lie or the kind who stands with the truth. That's easy for you to say. You're not the one who has to choose between family and family. I stepped closer, my voice low but sharp. My grandmother was family. Savannah is family. And look what your father did to Helena. Look what my sister is doing to me right now. Noah's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I shouldn't have said that. I backtracked smoothly. Nothing. Forget it. But Noah wasn't letting it go. No. What's Savannah doing to you? That's not your concern. Olivia, drop it, Noah. He stared at me for a long moment, then exhaled and turned back to the documents. I don't know what to do. Then don't do anything. Not yet. Just think about it. He nodded slowly, still staring at the papers. My father's not a good man, is he? No, I said quietly. He's not. Another long silence. Then Noah looked up at me, his expression shifting, something like resolve settling into his features. There's something you should know, he said. My father's been asking questions about you. My pulse spiked, but I kept my face neutral. What kind of questions? About where you live, what you do for work, how you're paying for things. He hesitated. He doesn't believe you're as broke as Savannah says you are. He thinks you're hiding something. Ice slid down my spine. Why would he think that? Because you're here. At a 5-star resort. For a week. Savannah told him she's covering your expenses, but he doesn't buy it. He said... Noah paused, looking uncomfortable. He said no one survives this long without money unless they have a source. And he wants to know what yours is. I forced myself to stay calm. And what did you tell him? Nothing. I don't know anything about you. He looked at me carefully. But he's digging Olivia. He has people, investigators. If there's something you don't want him to find, you need to be careful. Now, I nodded slowly, my mind racing. Robert was already suspicious. If he dug deep enough, if he connected the dots... Thank you for telling me, I said. Noah studied me for a moment longer, then gathered the documents and tucked them under his arm. I won't say anything to him about these files. Not yet. Why not? Because I want answers first. Real ones. And I don't think I'll get them from him. He walked toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. Olivia. Yeah, whatever you're hiding. Be careful. He left. I stood alone in the library staring at the empty table where the documents had been. Robert was digging, and if he found out who I really was before Saturday, everything I'd built would collapse. 46 hours until the wedding, and the walls were closing in. Sometimes the best intelligence comes from the places people think are safe. I stood outside room 304, the presidential suite, at exactly 2 p.m. The hallway was empty quiet except for the hum of a housekeeping cart 3 doors down. In my hand, a master key card, the kind only senior management and ownership had access to, the kind Savannah didn't know existed. I'd watched her leave 20 minutes ago through the security feed Frank had tapped into. She'd headed to the spa with 2 bridesmaids booking a 3-hour package. That gave me time. I swiped the card. The lock clicked green. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. The presidential suite was exactly what you'd expect for $12,000 a night. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. A king bed with white linens. A sitting area with a velvet sofa, marble coffee table, and a fully stocked bar. Fresh flowers on every surface. White roses, orchids, lilies. The air smelled like expensive perfume and room service. I moved quickly, methodically. 3 hours, but I couldn't afford to be careless. First stop, the bathroom. Marble countertops, a soaking tub, a shower for 4. I opened the cabinet under the sink. Makeup bags, hair products, skincare serums, and tucked in the back behind towels, a shoebox. I pulled it out and opened it. Pregnancy tests, 4 of them, all positive. Dated 6 months ago, August 2024. Beneath the tests, ultrasound photos, black and white images from the OBGYN. I held one up. In the corner, September 12th, 2024, handwritten in blue ink at the bottom, 20 weeks. 20 weeks in September meant Savannah was now 6 months pregnant. Due date late February. 1 week after the wedding. I photographed everything with my phone, then tucked the box back exactly where I'd found it. Next, the bedroom. I opened the nightstand drawer on Savannah's side, inside a journal, leather-bound monogrammed with her initials in gold. I flipped it open. The first page, wedding budget. I scanned the entries, my stomach tightening with every line. Vera Wang gown, $18,000. Cartier bracelet bridesmaids, $22,000. Chanel shoes, 3 pairs, $4,000. $500. Private jet to Paris engagement photos, $35,000. Hermes luggage, $12,000. Spa treatments, $8. 000. Champagne rehearsal dinner, $6,000. Page after page. Designer bags, jewelry, first-class flights, hotel suites in New York and Los Angeles. Every purchase dated and annotated. At the bottom of the last page in Savannah's looping handwriting, total spent $350,000. And beneath that, underlined twice, worth it. The Huntingtons will never know how broke I really am. I photographed every page, my hands steady, even as anger coiled tight in my chest. She'd stolen every cent from my grandmother's emergency fund and blown it on designer dresses and champagne to impress a family she was lying to. I closed the journal and slid it back into the drawer. I moved to the closet, walk-in the size of a small bedroom. Rows of dresses, still tagged shoes in boxes, handbags, lined up like soldiers. I ran my hand along the garments, looking for anything else. That's when I heard the key card beep at the door. My pulse spiked. I glanced at my phone. 2:30 p.m. Savannah wasn't supposed to be back for another hour. The door swung open. I didn't hesitate. I stepped deeper into the closet, pressing myself behind a rack of evening gowns, pulling the door almost closed, but leaving a crack to see through. Savannah walked in, phone pressed to her ear. She was in her spa robe, barefoot hair, wrapped in a towel. She looked irritated. "I don't care what you think, Robert. He's asking questions." A pause. She paced toward the window, her back to the closet. "Yes, about you, about 1985. He found the files in your safe." My breath caught. Noah had told her. Savannah's voice dropped lower, sharper. "No, I didn't tell him anything. I don't know the details. You never told me, remember? That was your rule." Another pause. She laughed bitterly. "Of course I'm sure he won't go to Olivia. Why would he? She's nobody. She doesn't even know what happened back then." Wrong, but I stayed perfectly still. "Listen," Savannah said, her tone shifting to something smoother, more calculated. "Noah's getting cold feet. He's been distant all weekend. I think he's starting to suspect something's off." She sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window. "We need to move faster. Push the wedding timeline up if we have to. Once we're married and I'm in his will, it doesn't matter what he suspects. The baby will have the Huntington name, and I'll have legal claim to everything if something happens to him." I slid down my spine. Savannah's voice softened, almost businesslike. "You said it yourself, Robert. Accidents happen. Rich men die young all the time. Skiing accidents, heart attacks, car crashes on mountain roads." I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. "I'm not saying we do it right away," Savannah continued. "But once I'm legally his wife and the baby's born, we have options, and you get your 50%, just like we agreed." She stood walking toward the bathroom. "I have to go. My next appointment starts in 10 minutes. Just handle Noah if he keeps asking questions. Tell him you'll explain everything after the wedding. Keep him calm." A pause. "See you tomorrow, Robert." She hung up. I froze. Savannah disappeared into the bathroom. I heard the shower turn on. I counted to 30, then slipped out of the closet, moved silently across the suite, and let myself out into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind me. I walked quickly toward the service elevator, my mind racing. Savannah wasn't just stealing from me. She wasn't just lying to Noah about the baby. She was planning to murder him. And Robert Huntington, the man who destroyed my grandmother 40 years ago, was helping her do it. For money. 50% of Noah's inheritance. Robert was willing to help murder his own son. My sister was marrying Noah to kill him, and Robert was her partner in crime. The grand ballroom looked like a palace. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, casting golden light across marble floors. An orchestra played Vivaldi. White-gloved waiters circulated with champagne and caviar. A fountain bubbled at the room's center, liquid gold cascading over crystal tiers. 200 guests in tuxedos and evening gowns. Diamonds at throats. Conversations in that particular tone of people who'd never worried about money. I stood near the entrance in my black H&M dress. No jewelry except grandmother's chain. I looked exactly like what I was supposed to be, the charity case. Heads turned, whispers followed. That's the sister. Savannah's paying for everything. Poor thing. I walked to the bar and ordered club soda. Savannah stood near the fountain in a silver marchesa gown. Noah beside her in a tailored tuxedo, his hand resting lightly on her lower back. They looked perfect, the golden couple, the future merger of two powerful families. Noah looked happy, completely unaware his fiancée was planning to murder him for his inheritance. Olivia. Robert Huntington's voice smooth and cold. I turned. He stood 3 feet away, Scotch in hand tuxedo fitted like Milan tailoring, silver hair swept back, eyes like broken glass. Robert. He didn't lower his voice this time. He wanted people to hear. I'm surprised you showed up tonight. Most people would have the sense to stay away when they don't belong. A few conversations nearby stopped. Heads turned. I was invited, I said quietly, by Savannah, out of pity. He raised his voice slightly, addressing not just me, but the growing circle of guests around us. Tell me, Olivia, how does it feel to watch your little sister marry into one of the wealthiest families in the country while you're still living paycheck to paycheck? More guests turned. A woman in diamonds whispered to her companion. I'm happy for her, I said, keeping my tone even. Robert laughed, sharp, cruel. Happy you're wearing a dress from Target to a black tie event. You couldn't even afford the bus ticket here. Savannah had to wire you money. That wasn't true, but I didn't correct him. I knew your grandmother. Robert continued, his voice carrying across the room now. Half the ballroom was watching. Helena Fitzgerald. Back in the 80s, she thought she could build an empire. Thought she was untouchable. He paused for effect. But empires fall, don't they? And the Fitzgerald empire. He gestured at me with his glass. This is what's left. A girl in a thrift store dress begging for scraps at someone else's wedding. A few people laughed. Others looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Savannah stood near the fountain watching. She didn't defend me, she just smiled. I met Robert's gaze, perfectly calm. You seem very confident about that. I am. Because I watched your grandmother's empire burn. I was there when she lost everything. And now look at you, the last pathetic remnant of a family that means nothing anymore. Something flickered in his eyes. He was waiting for me to break, to cry, to run. I didn't. I set my glass down on the bar. You know what I've learned, Robert? The most dangerous ruins are the ones that look abandoned, because sometimes what's buried underneath is still very much alive. His jaw tightened. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I smiled small cold. Just an observation. I walked away. The crowd parted. Whispers followed me. I stepped onto the terrace. Cold February air hit like a slap. Through the glass doors, I watched the orchestra shift to a waltz. Couples moved across the floor. Savannah and Noah at the center, spinning gracefully. She looked radiant. He looked in love. He had no idea she was planning to kill him. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. 7:45 p.m. Tomorrow was Sunday, one day before the wedding. That's when I saw him. Tyler Brooks stood at the parking lot's edge, leaning against a rusted Honda Civic among the Teslas and Mercedes. 30-something, dark hair needing a cut, unshaven jaw. Jeans, flannel jacket, work boots. He stared at the ballroom like he wanted to burn it down. I walked toward him. He straightened. Who the hell are you? Olivia, Savannah's sister. Recognition, then anger. Oh, you're the broke one. That's me. He laughed bitterly. At least you're honest. Savannah's in there pretending to be a princess marrying a guy who doesn't know she's pregnant with my kid. I know. He stared. You know. I know everything, Tyler. You're the father. She's 6 months pregnant. She's planning to pass the baby off as Noah's. His face went red. I'm not here to beg. I'm here to tell her she can't do this. She can, and she will. I pulled out my phone. But you need to see something first. I opened the photos I'd taken in Savannah's suite, the spending journal, page after page of luxury purchases, $350,000 spent on designer dresses, jewelry, champagne. Tyler stared at the screen. What is this? Your daughter's inheritance. Money Savannah stole to buy her way into the Huntington family. I swiped to the next photo, a text message I'd captured from Savannah's phone records. Savannah to unknown number, January 15th, 2025. Once I'm married and the baby's born, Tyler becomes a problem. We'll pay him off. If he doesn't take it, we'll make him disappear. Tyler's hands shook. Who's we? Savannah and Robert Huntington. They're partners. Partners in what? I met his eyes. In making sure Noah Huntington doesn't live long enough to find out the truth. Tyler's face went white. You're saying she's going to kill him? Yes, after the wedding. Once she's in his will and the baby's born, Noah becomes expendable. And so do you. He stared at the phone, then at the ballroom. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to stay away. Don't crash the wedding. Don't make a scene. Let her think she's won. And then what? Then I make sure she gets exactly what she deserves. Tyler looked at me for a long moment. What do you get out of this? Justice. For my grandmother, for Noah, for everyone they've hurt. And for me, for my daughter, I pulled an envelope from my coat. $50,000 now. Another $100,000 after the baby's born. Plus legal custody if you want it. He stared at the envelope. You want me to walk away? I want you to let me handle this. If you go in there and expose her now, she'll find a way out. She always does. But if you wait, if you let me finish what I've started, she'll have nowhere to run. He took the envelope slowly, opened it, looked at the cashier's check. How do I know you'll keep your word? You don't, but you know Savannah won't. So who are you going to trust? He stared at the ballroom one more time. Then he pulled a pen from his jacket and signed the contract I'd tucked inside. I want to be in my daughter's life, he said quietly. You will be, I promise. He got in his car and drove away. I stood alone in the parking lot watching his taillights disappear. One more variable secured. One more piece in place. 36 hours until the wedding, and the walls were closing in. The penthouse was silent except for the fireplace. I stood at the window in my black dress watching snow fall over Vale. 10 p.m. The gala would be ending. Savannah and Noah saying goodbyes, playing the perfect couple. 36 hours until the wedding. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Olivia Sinclair. It's Tyler Brooks. His voice was rough. I drove halfway to Denver before I turned around. Why? Because I can't take your money and walk away. I need you to know what she did to me. I sat at the table. I'm listening. I met Savannah 3 years ago, Boulder construction site. She came looking for a lost dog. He laughed bitterly. There was no dog. She wanted to meet me. I thought I got lucky, beautiful woman interested in a guy like me. When did you realize it wasn't luck? 6 months in, she started asking about money. When I said I was broke, she said it didn't matter. That's when the gifts started. What kind of gifts? Cash. 1,000 here, 2,000 there. Paid my rent, bought me a truck. She said it was from her marketing job. His voice dropped. I've been going through my records. 3 years. She gave me almost $40,000. I thought it was hers. I didn't know she was stealing it from you. My chest tightened. From my grandmother's account. Yeah, I thought she loved me, but she was buying me, keeping me around until she got what she needed. The baby. Once she got pregnant, everything changed. Stopped answering calls, said she was busy. 2 months ago, she told me she was getting back with her ex. Some rich guy named Noah. Said we were done. But you didn't accept that. I couldn't. She was pregnant with my kid, so I started following her. That's how I found out about the wedding. He paused. After I left the resort, I went through old messages. Recovered some from cloud backup. I'm sending them now. My phone buzzed. 3 images. First message. Savannah to Tyler June, 2024. I transferred $5,000 to your account. Use it for the apartment deposit. Second. Savannah to Tyler August 2024. Once I get what I need from this wedding, we'll disappear together. Mexico, like we talked about. Just you, me, and our little girl. 3rd, Savannah to Tyler, December 2024. I bought the plane tickets. February 15th, 1 week after the wedding. Fake IDs, new passports, everything's ready. Stay quiet until then. I stared at the screen. She told you she was leaving with you. Yeah, she had it all planned. Marry Noah, drain his accounts, then disappear with me before anyone figured it out. His laugh was hollow. I believed her. Thought we'd be a family. But the text I showed you tonight, make him disappear. Yeah, she was never taking me to Mexico. She was planning to kill me. Silence stretched between us. Those plane tickets, I said. Were they real? I don't know, and maybe she just told me that to keep me quiet. He exhaled. She used me, and she used your money to do it. I walked back to the window. Below the resort glittered. Tyler, how much do you know about where Savannah kept the money? What do you mean? You said $40,000. That's out of $350,000. Where's the rest? A pause. She's got a safe deposit box. Bank of Denver, downtown branch. I drove her there once. She said it was for documents, but I saw cash inside. Stacks of hundreds. Had to be at least $100,000. My pulse quickened. Do you know the box number? No, but she keeps the key in her jewelry case. Small silver key with a red tag. I closed my eyes. I'd seen that jewelry case this afternoon. Why are you telling me this? Because I want her to pay. Not just for lying, not just for planning to kill me, but for using me. His voice was furious. You want justice for your grandmother. I want justice for myself and my daughter. So I'm not just taking your money and walking away. I'm in. Whatever you're planning, I want to help. You already signed the contract. I know, and I'll honor it. But after the wedding, after you expose her, I want to be there. I want her to see my face when everything collapses. Tyler as an active ally was more valuable than paid silence. All right, stay away from the resort until Saturday. No contact with Savannah. After the FBI arrests Robert and the truth comes out, you step forward as biological father. You'll have legal standing for custody. And Savannah, federal charges for wire fraud. $350,000 stolen across state lines. 5 to 10 years minimum. Good, she deserves worse. She'll get worse, trust me. Long silence. Thank you for showing me the truth. Thank you for the information about the box. You're going after it, aren't you? Not the money, the evidence. If she's hiding cash, she's hiding other things. Documents. Maybe proof of her arrangement with Robert. Be careful. I will. Tyler was quiet, then, one more thing. That key in her jewelry case. There's something else with it. A USB drive. Black, small, labeled insurance. My breath caught. Insurance against what? I don't know. But if she's keeping it locked up with a safe deposit key, it's important. Thank you, Tyler. Don't thank me yet. Just make sure she pays. She will. He hung up. I stood alone, my mind racing. Safe deposit box with cash, USB drive labeled insurance. A key and a secret, both in Savannah's jewelry case. Tomorrow was Sunday, one day before the wedding. I had 36 hours to get that key and find out what my sister was really hiding. I woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. February 10th, wedding day. The penthouse was silent. I lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of 2 years settle into this single morning. Everything I'd built, every move I'd made, every sacrifice I'd endured, it all came down to the next 8 hours. I sat up and checked my phone. 8 a.m. The ceremony started at 2. 6 hours. I walked to the table where my laptop sat open. The 3 folders stared back at me exactly where I'd left them last night. Savannah. 17 bank withdrawals, ultrasound photos, Tyler's signed contract, text messages proving the murder plot, the spending journal showing $350,000 blown on designer dresses and champagne, and now tucked beside the laptop a small silver key with a red tag. I'd gotten it Monday night, slipped into Savannah's suite while she was at the spa, opened her jewelry case, and taken both the key and the USB drive she'd hidden there. She hadn't noticed yet. Or if she had, she was too distracted by wedding preparations to care. I picked up the USB drive. Black, small, still labeled insurance in Savannah's handwriting. I'd plugged it in last night. What I'd found made everything else look like child's play. Video files, dozens of them. Recordings of phone calls between Savannah and Robert going back 18 months. Conversations about the murder plot, the timeline, the accident they'd stage after the honeymoon. But more than that, recordings of Robert discussing his trafficking network. Names, locations, shell companies, wire transfers. Everything the FBI needed to put him away for life. Savannah had been recording Robert the whole time. Insurance in case he ever turned on her. She documented his crimes to protect herself, never realizing she'd handed me the evidence to destroy them both. I closed the laptop and walked to the closet. No more H&M dresses. No more Target shoes. No more playing the broke, struggling sister. I pulled out the outfit I'd had delivered yesterday. A tailored suit in charcoal gray cut perfectly to fit. Silk blouse in ivory. Heels in black leather Louboutin, the kind with red soles that cost more than most people's rent. A cashmere coat. Real jewelry diamond studs, a platinum watch. A necklace that had belonged to my grandmother. I laid everything on the bed and stared at it. For 2 years, I'd worn a costume. Cheap clothes, minimal makeup, old shoes. I'd let people look at me and see exactly what I wanted them to see: nothing. A girl who didn't matter. A sister who'd failed. The last pathetic remnant of a family that meant nothing. But that girl was gone. I stepped into the shower and let the hot water wash away the mask I'd been wearing. When I stepped out, I looked at myself in the mirror. Not the struggling Olivia, not the broke Olivia. Just me. I dried my hair and styled it sleek, professional, elegant. Makeup subtle but polished. Lips in classic red. I dressed slowly, each piece of clothing feeling like armor. The suit fit perfectly. The heels made me taller. The jewelry caught the light. I looked at my reflection one more time. This was who I'd always been. This was who Helena had raised me to be. Not a victim, not a beggar, a woman who built empires and burned the people who tried to destroy them. I walked back to the table and opened the manila folder Henry Blackburn, my lead attorney, had delivered yesterday. Inside, legal documents, all signed and notarized. Criminal complaint against Savannah Sinclair. Wire fraud, $350,000 stolen across state lines. Custody petition on behalf of Tyler Brooks, biological father seeking full custody of minor child. Corporate disclosure proof of ownership. I controlled 40% of the Alpine Majesty Resort through a holding company registered under my grandmother's maiden name. FBI cooperation agreement. My signature agent Torres's signature. 2 years of intelligence documented and sealed. Everything was ready. My phone buzzed. A text from Frank Murphy. Torres and his team are in position. 4 agents undercover. Arrest warrant active at 3 p.m. Robert has no idea. You're clear to proceed. I replied, acknowledged. Another text, this one from Henry. Press statement drafted and ready. The moment you give the word, it goes out to every major outlet. The Monarch Group CEO reveal will break within minutes. I smiled. Stand by. I poured myself coffee and walked to the window. Below, the resort was already buzzing. Guests arriving for the ceremony. Staff setting up the grand terrace where the wedding would take place. White chairs in perfect rows. An archway covered in roses. A red carpet leading down the aisle. Savannah and Noah would stand under that archway in 6 hours. She'd wear her Vera Wang gown bought with my grandmother's stolen money. He'd wear his tuxedo, completely unaware his bride was planning to murder him. Robert would sit in the front row, confident that his past was buried and his future secure. And I would walk in not as the charity case, not as the struggling sister, but as exactly who I was. The CEO of a $4.3 billion empire. The woman who owned 40% of the ground they were standing on. The granddaughter of Helena Fitzgerald, the woman Robert Huntington thought he'd destroyed 40 years ago. I'd let them think they'd won. I'd let them humiliate me, belittle me, dismiss me. I'd played the role so well, they'd forgotten to ask the most important question. Who was Olivia Sinclair really? Today they'd find out. I finished my coffee and set the cup down. My phone buzzed again. This time, an unknown number. I frowned and answered. Olivia Sinclair. Mrs. Sinclair. The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. My name is James Carr. I'm a private investigator working for Robert Huntington. My pulse spiked, but I kept my voice steady. How did you get this number? That's not important. What's important is that I've been investigating you for the past 72 hours, and I think Mr. Huntington would be very interested to know what I've found. Ice slid down my spine. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? He paused. The Monarch Group, $4.3 billion, 40% ownership of the Alpine Majesty Resort, CEO since 2020. Ring any bells? My mind raced. What do you want? I want to make a deal. You pay me $2 million and this information never reaches Mr. Huntington. He goes to that wedding thinking you're nobody. You get to keep your little revenge plan intact. And if I don't, then I call him in the next 10 minutes. And by the time you walk into that ceremony, he'll be on a plane to Prague. I stared out the window, my reflection staring back. $2 million. Or Robert disappeared and everything I'd built collapsed. How do I know you won't take the money and tell him anyway? You don't. But you know what you do know. If I tell him now, you lose everything for free. At least this way you have a chance. I closed my eyes. The walls were closing in, and I was out of time. The text came at 10:30 a.m. Unknown number, Mr. Huntington requests your presence in the executive lounge. Immediately. I stared at the message. The PI had made his call. Robert knew. I replied, I'll be there in 15 minutes. I finished my coffee, checked my reflection one last time, and walked out of the penthouse. The executive lounge sat on the resort's top floor, reserved for VIPs and high rollers. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains, leather chairs, a private bar, oil paintings on the walls. The kind of room where deals were made and enemies were destroyed. Robert Huntington stood at the window, his back to the door. Navy suit perfectly tailored, silver hair. He didn't turn when I walked in. Close the door, he said. I did. Then I walked to the center of the room and waited. He turned slowly, his eyes cold and assessing. I'm going to make this very simple, Olivia. You have two choices. You leave Vale in the next hour or you disappear after the wedding, permanently. I met his gaze, perfectly calm. Is that a threat? It's a promise. He stepped closer. I had you investigated. Do you know what my man found? I'm sure you're about to tell me. He found a very interesting story. A girl named Olivia Sinclair who supposedly runs a company called the Monarch Group. $4.3 billion. Quite impressive. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Except it doesn't add up. Because the Olivia Sinclair I've been watching for the past 3 days can't even afford decent shoes. So either my investigator is lying or you're running some kind of elaborate con. I said nothing. Robert circled me slowly like a predator. Here's what I think. I think you found out about the Monarch Group maybe through your grandmother's old papers, and you're pretending to be someone you're not. Identity theft. Corporate fraud. Trying to ride on Helena's name. Interesting theory. It's the only theory that makes sense. Because if you really were the CEO of a billion-dollar company, you wouldn't be wearing H&M dresses and begging your sister for handouts. Maybe I have my reasons. He laughed, sharp, cruel. Reasons. The only reason a rich woman pretends to be poor is if she's insane. And you don't strike me as insane, Olivia. You strike me as desperate. I tilted my head slightly. Desperate for what? Attention, revenge, a chance to matter. He stopped in front of me. Your grandmother built an empire and she left you nothing. That will, in 2020, it was contested. Savannah told me. Helena's estate went to creditors, lawyers, tax collectors. By the time they were done, there was nothing left. You got scraps. Is that what Savannah told you? It's what the public records show. I had my people pull the probate files. Helena Fitzgerald died broke, and so did her legacy. I smiled, small cold. You seem very confident about that. I am, because I was there when your grandmother lost everything in 1985. I watched her beg, plead, threaten, and it didn't matter. The money was gone. She spent the next decade crawling back from nothing, and when she finally died, she had nothing to show for it. Nothing, I repeated softly. Nothing. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. So whatever game you're playing, whatever con you're trying to run, it ends today. You leave Vale, or I make you disappear. And trust me, Olivia, people disappear all the time in my world. I held his gaze for a long moment, then I stepped back. You're right about one thing, Robert. People do disappear in your world, but not today. His eyes narrowed. Excuse me, I'm not leaving. I'm staying for the wedding. Front row if I feel like it. Then you've chosen death. Have I? I walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. You know what's funny, Robert? You're standing in my hotel, threatening me in my lounge at my resort, and you don't even know it. His face went still. What did you say? Nothing, just an observation. I opened the door. See you at the ceremony. I walked out before he could respond. The hallway was empty. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd programmed months ago. It rang twice. Ms. Sinclair. The voice was crisp, professional female. Jennifer Cole, my executive assistant at the Monarch Group. We'd never met in person. I'd kept her at arm's length to maintain my cover, but she'd been coordinating my Vale operation remotely for 18 months. Jennifer, it's time. Understood. What are your instructions? I walked toward the elevator, my heels clicking on marble floors. Activate full ownership protocols. I want documentation filed with the county clerk in the next hour showing my controlling interest in the Alpine Majesty Resort. Done. What else? Contact resort security. 15 minutes after the wedding ceremony begins, I want every exit sealed. No one leaves the property without my authorization. FBI has priority access agent David Torres and his team. Everyone else is locked down. Locked down, Jennifer repeated. That's going to cause panic. Let it. Tell security it's a federal operation. Anyone who resists gets detained. Understood. Anything else? Yes. Draft a press release. Olivia Sinclair, CEO of the Monarch Group, announces controlling ownership of the Alpine Majesty Resort as part of ongoing federal investigation into criminal activity. Timestamp it for 3 p.m. The moment the FBI makes their arrests, that statement goes live to every major outlet. Consider it done. And Jennifer, thank you for everything. It's been an honor, Ms. Sinclair. I hung up and stepped into the elevator. My reflection stared back at me from the polished steel doors, tailored suit, red lips, diamond earrings. Not the struggling sister. Not the charity case. The CEO of a $4.3 billion empire. Robert thought he'd cornered me, thought he'd called my bluff, but he'd made one critical mistake. He'd assumed I was playing his game. I wasn't. I was playing mine. The elevator doors opened on the ground floor. Guests were already arriving for the wedding tuxedos, evening gowns, champagne in hand. The grand terrace was visible through the glass doors set up exactly as I'd seen this morning. White chairs, rose-covered archway, red carpet. In 3 hours, Savannah and Noah would stand under that archway. And in 3 hours and 15 minutes, every exit would be sealed. Every guest would be trapped, and Robert Huntington would realize exactly who he'd been threatening. I walked through the lobby, my head high. The hunt was over, and I'd won before the prey even knew they were caught. The text came at 12:30. Savannah, come to my suite. Now, I need you for something. I stared at the message. One final humiliation before the ceremony. Of course. I replied, on my way. I left the penthouse still wearing my charcoal suit and Louboutin heels. Let her see me like this polished, put-together powerful. One last glimpse before everything changed. The presidential suite was chaos when I arrived. The door stood half open, voices spilling into the hallway. I stepped inside. Savannah stood in front of a full-length mirror surrounded by 3 bridesmaids in blush-pink gowns. Her wedding dress was stunning. A Vera Wang ivory silk with delicate lace sleeves and a fitted bodice that flowed into a dramatic train. $18,000 of stolen money draped over my sister like a costume. A makeup artist worked on her face. A hairstylist pinned white roses into her updo. A photographer snapped pictures from every angle. Savannah caught my reflection in the mirror and turned. There you are. Her eyes swept over me, narrowing slightly. What are you wearing? A suit. I can see that. Why? Because it's what I packed. She exchanged a glance with one of her bridesmaids, a blonde named Madison who'd been at the rehearsal dinner. They both smirked. Well, you can't wear that to the ceremony, Savannah said, turning back to the mirror. You'll ruin the photos. I wasn't planning on being in any photos. Your family, of course you'll be in photos. She gestured to a garment bag hanging on the closet door. I had something made for you. Go put it on. I walked to the bag and unzipped it slowly. Inside was a dress, brown, shapeless, made of some kind of cheap polyester that looked like it came from a discount bin. Short sleeves, high neckline, a hemline that would hit mid-calf. The kind of dress your grandmother would wear to church in 1987. One of the bridesmaids giggled. I held the dress up. You're joking. I'm not. Savannah applied lipstick, her eyes meeting mine in the mirror. Everyone else is in blush pink, but those dresses are expensive and I didn't want to waste money on you. So I had that made. It's perfectly appropriate for someone of your means. My means. Well, you can't afford anything better, can you? She capped the lipstick and turned to face me fully. Besides, it matches your aesthetic. Simple, plain, forgettable. Madison laughed outright. The other bridesmaids looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to speak up. I stared at the dress. Then I looked at Savannah. She was radiant, hair perfect, makeup flawless. The Vera Wang fit her like it had been painted on. But I could see it, the slight curve of her stomach beneath the silk, carefully disguised by the dress's empire waist and strategic draping. 6 months pregnant. Due in 1 week. And Noah had no idea. Put it on, Savannah said. The ceremony starts in an hour. I don't have time for your drama. I walked into the bathroom and closed the door. The dress felt as cheap as it looked. Scratchy polyester. No shape, no style. The color made my skin look sallow under the fluorescent lights. I looked at myself in the mirror, the woman in the ugly brown dress, and almost laughed. 2 years. I'd spent 2 years playing this role. And now for one final hour, Savannah wanted me to wear a costume that matched what she thought I was. Fine. I walked back into the suite. Savannah looked me up and down and smiled. Perfect. Now you look like yourself. The bridesmaids giggled again. The photographer raised his camera. Can I get a photo of the bride with her sister? Of course. Savannah pulled me close, her arm around my waist. She smelled like expensive perfume, the kind that cost $300 an ounce. I smelled like nothing. The camera flashed. Savannah released me immediately and turned back to the mirror. You can go now. The ceremony starts at 2. Don't be late. I didn't move. Can I say something first? She glanced at me, irritated. What? I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. I just wanted to say congratulations on everything, the dress, the wedding, the baby. Her face went still. What did you say? The baby. I glanced down at her stomach, barely visible beneath the silk. 6 months right, due late February. The color drained from her face. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. I smiled. Just like you don't know where the $350,000 you've spent over the past 2 years came from. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. Keep your voice down. Why afraid someone might hear? I pulled my arm free. Don't worry, Savannah, your secret's safe for now. She stared at me, her chest rising and falling rapidly. You don't know anything. Don't I turned to leave, then paused at the door. The bridesmaids were across the room, out of earshot. I looked back at Savannah one more time. You know what's funny? I said quietly. You've spent 2 years stealing from me, thinking you were taking everything I had. You bought this dress with my money. You paid for this wedding with my money. You've been living off what you thought was my last dime. So, she lifted her chin. You had it. I took it. That's how the world works. You're right. That is how the world works. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. So congratulations, Savannah. You spent every penny you thought I had. I hope it was worth it. Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I smiled, small, cold final. You'll find out soon enough. I walked out before she could respond. The hallway was empty. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. 1:15 p.m., 45 minutes until the ceremony. I typed a quick text to Jennifer, status. Her reply came immediately. Lockdown protocols ready, security briefed, FBI in position, press release queued for 3 p.m. Everything's set. I replied, good, activate on my signal. I walked toward the elevator, my heels clicking on marble floors. Behind me, I could hear Savannah's voice, sharp and angry, snapping at one of the bridesmaids about something. She was nervous, good. She should be. In 45 minutes, she'd walk down the aisle in her $18,000 dress, carrying a baby that wasn't her fiancé's, planning a murder she'd never get to commit. And I'd be watching from the audience wearing an ugly brown dress looking like exactly what she thought I was. Right up until the moment I wasn't. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. The doors closed on my reflection, cheap brown dress, simple hair, minimal makeup. The last disguise. In 1 hour, I'd take it off, and Savannah would learn what it costs to underestimate someone you thought you'd already destroyed. The grand terrace was perfect. 200 white chairs arranged in neat rows on either side of a red carpet. An archway covered in white roses and ivy stood at the front, framing a view of snow-capped mountains that stretched endlessly into the distance. The sky was clear, brilliant blue. Sunlight poured down like liquid gold. String quartet playing Pachelbel's canon. Waiters in white gloves standing ready with champagne for the reception. Guests in tuxedos and evening gowns, diamonds glittering at throats. Conversations hushed and expectant. I sat in the back row alone. The ugly brown dress made me invisible. A few guests glanced my way, pity in their eyes, but no one spoke to me. Perfect. At the front, Noah stood beside the officiant, hands clasped in front of him. He wore a black tuxedo, perfectly tailored. His best man, a Yale classmate, stood beside him. But Noah's face was pale, his jaw tight. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. Good instincts. Robert Huntington sat in the front row, directly across the aisle from where the bride's family should have been. But Savannah had no family left except me. So Robert sat alone, confident and smiling, completely unaware that FBI agents were scattered through the crowd disguised as guests. Agent Torres sat 3 rows behind Robert wearing a dark suit and sunglasses. I'd spotted 2 more agents near the exits, 1 more by the bar, waiting. The string quartet shifted to Wagner's bridal chorus. Everyone stood. I stood with them, my hands folded, my face neutral. The bridesmaids came first, walking slowly down the aisle in their blush pink gowns. Madison, then 2 others whose names I didn't know. They took their positions at the front, holding small bouquets of white roses. Then came Savannah. She appeared at the top of the aisle alone. No father to walk her down, no family to give her away. Just Savannah standing in the archway leading onto the terrace, backlit by afternoon sun. She looked stunning. The Vera Wang fit her perfectly ivory silk lace sleeves, a train that trailed behind her like liquid moonlight. Her hair was pinned up with white roses, her makeup flawless. She carried a bouquet of white peonies and held her head high, a smile on her lips that said she'd won. She walked down the aisle slowly, deliberately. Every eye in the audience followed her. A few people whispered. Someone's phone camera flashed. Noah watched her approach, and for a moment something flickered across his face. Not joy, not love, something closer to resignation. He knew. On some level, he knew something was wrong. But he was standing here anyway because walking away would mean admitting he'd been a fool. Savannah reached the front. The officiant, an older man in dark robes, smiled at the couple. Dearly beloved. He began, his voice carrying across the terrace. We are gathered here today to witness the union of Savannah Sinclair and Noah Huntington in holy matrimony. I stayed perfectly still, my hands folded in front of me. Marriage is a sacred bond. The officiant continued, built on trust, honesty, and love. It is not to be entered into lightly, but with reverence and commitment. Trust, honesty, love. I almost laughed. The officiant turned to Noah. Noah Huntington, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, till death do you part? Noah hesitated, just for a second, then, I do. The officiant turned to Savannah. Savannah Sinclair, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, till death do you part? Savannah smiled. I do. The officiant nodded. If there is anyone present who has objections to this union, speak now or forever. Hold your peace. Silence. 200 guests sat perfectly still. The officiant waited the traditional moment, then opened his mouth to continue. I stood. The sound of my chair scraping against stone echoed across the terrace. Every head turned. The officiant blinked. I'm sorry, is there? I object. My voice cut through the silence like a blade. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Heads turned. Whispers erupted. Savannah's head whipped toward me, her eyes wide. Noah stared confused. Robert half stood from his seat, his face darkening. The officiant cleared his throat. Miss, this is highly irregular. On what grounds do you object? I stepped into the aisle. Every eye in the audience followed me as I walked slowly toward the front, my cheap brown dress rustling with each step. On the grounds, I said clearly, my voice carrying across the stunned silence, that the bride is 6 months pregnant with another man's child. The silence shattered. Guests erupted into shocked whispers. Someone gasped. A woman in the third row said, "Oh my God," loud enough for half the terrace to hear. Savannah's face went white, then red, then white again. "That's a lie," she hissed. I kept walking until I stood 10 feet from the altar, close enough for everyone to hear me, close enough to see the panic in Savannah's eyes. "Is it?" I met her gaze. "You're 6 months pregnant, Savannah, due late February, 1 week from today." Noah turned to look at his bride, his face draining of color. "What is she talking about?" "She's lying!" Savannah's voice rose shrill. "She's insane. She's been jealous of me her entire life, and now she's trying to ruin my wedding." August 14th, 2024, I said calmly. "That's when you got pregnant. You've been hiding it with loose dresses and strategic angles, but the ultrasound photos don't lie. Neither does the DNA test." Savannah's bouquet trembled in her hands. "You're making this up." "Am I?" I pulled my phone from the pocket I'd sewn into the horrible brown dress. I held it up, screen facing the crowd. "This is an ultrasound photo dated September 12th, 2024. 20 weeks gestation. That makes you 26 weeks now, 6 months. I swiped to the next image. "And this is a DNA test conducted 3 weeks ago confirming that the biological father of your child is not Noah Huntington." I looked at Noah. His face had gone gray. "It's a man named Tyler Brooks, a construction worker from Boulder. He's the father of Savannah's baby." Noah staggered back a step. His best man grabbed his arm to steady him. "You're lying," Savannah repeated, but her voice cracked. "This is fake. You doctored those photos." "Did I?" I turned to face the crowd. "Tyler Brooks is here, right now. He can confirm everything I'm saying." I gestured toward the back of the terrace. Tyler stepped out from behind a pillar where he'd been waiting. He wore jeans and a clean shirt, not a tuxedo, but respectable. His face was set, determined. He walked down the aisle slowly, his eyes locked on Savannah. "It's true," he said, his voice rough but steady. "The baby's mine. Savannah and I were together for 3 years. She told me she loved me. She told me we'd run away together after the wedding. She lied about all of it." Savannah's face twisted. "Get out. You have no right." "I have every right." Tyler stopped beside me. "That's my daughter you're carrying. And I'll be damned if I let you pass her off as someone else's child so you can murder her real father for his money." The crowd erupted. "Murder," someone shouted. "What is he talking about? Is this real?" Noah turned to Savannah, his eyes wide, desperate. "Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you're not pregnant. Tell me—" "It's not true," Savannah's voice broke. "He's lying. She's lying. This is all—" I held up my phone again. "This is a recording. A phone call between Savannah and Robert Huntington discussing how to murder Noah after the wedding to access his inheritance." I pressed play. Savannah's voice, tinny but unmistakable, filled the silent terrace. "Once I'm legally his wife and the baby's born, we have options. Accidents happen. Rich men die young all the time." Noah's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the altar to keep from falling. Robert stood from his seat, his face purple with rage. "Turn that off." Why, I looked at him, afraid people will hear the truth that you and my sister have been planning to murder your own son for his money. Robert lunged toward me, and that's when Agent Torres stepped forward, badge raised. "Robert Huntington, you're under arrest." Chaos erupted across the terrace. Guests stood from their seats shouting questions. The bridesmaids huddled together, staring at Savannah. The string quartet stopped playing. Someone's champagne glass shattered on stone. Agent Torres moved toward Robert, but Robert shoved him back. "Don't touch me!" Robert's voice boomed across the terrace. "This is insane. You have no authority here." "Federal warrant," Torres said calmly, pulling handcuffs from his jacket. "Human trafficking, wire fraud, conspiracy. You're coming with us." 2 more agents materialized from the crowd, moving to flank Robert. But everyone was still staring at Savannah. She stood frozen at the altar, her bouquet fallen to the ground, her face a mask of shock and rage. "This is a setup. She's lying. All of this is fake. It's not fake." Tyler stepped closer to the altar. "Savannah, I have the ultrasound photos you sent me, the text where you told me you loved me, the receipts for the plane tickets to Mexico you said we'd use to disappear together." "Shut up," Savannah hissed. "No." Tyler's voice broke. "I stayed quiet for months because you convinced me it was for the best, but you were never going to take me to Mexico. You were planning to kill me. Just like you were planning to kill Noah." Noah staggered backward, his best man catching him by the elbow. "Planning to kill me?" His voice was barely above a whisper. I pulled my phone out again. "This is a text message from Savannah to an unknown number dated January 15th of this year." I read it aloud. "Once I'm married and the baby's born, Tyler becomes a problem. We'll pay him off. If he doesn't take it, we'll make him disappear." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Noah turned to Savannah, his eyes wide and desperate. "Tell me she's making this up, please. Tell me this isn't real." Savannah opened her mouth, closed it. Her hands shook. "Tell me—" Noah's voice cracked. Savannah's voice faltered. "Noah, I can explain." "Explain what?" Noah ripped the ring off his finger and threw it to the ground. It bounced once on the stone and rolled toward the roses. "Explain that you're pregnant with someone else's child. Explain that you were planning to murder me." "No, I wasn't. I never—" Savannah reached for him, but he jerked away. "Don't touch me." His voice was cold empty. "We're done." He turned and walked down the aisle, his best man following. Guests parted to let him through. He didn't look back. Savannah stood alone at the altar, her wedding dress suddenly looking like a costume. Her makeup started to run as tears streaked down her face. "Noah, wait!" She tried to follow him, but her legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees, the train of her dress pooling around her like spilled milk. The bridesmaids backed away uncertain. Savannah looked up, scanning the crowd desperately. Her eyes landed on Robert. "Help me," she whispered. Then louder. "Robert, please. You said you'd take care of everything. You promised." Robert turned to her, his face twisted with fury. "You stupid fool." His voice was ice. "You ruined everything. All you had to do was keep your mouth shut and play the loving bride. But you couldn't even do that." Savannah's face crumpled. "But I did what you said. I did everything." "You got caught," Robert roared. "You let this pathetic girl," he jabbed a finger at me, "destroy a plan we spent 2 years building, because you were careless, because you were weak." Savannah sobbed. "I'm sorry, I didn't know she—" "I don't care." Robert turned away from her, dismissing her completely. He looked at the crowd, then at the security guards standing near the exits. "Where's resort security? Someone throw this girl out. Now," he pointed at me. The head of security, Kevin Matthews, a man I'd worked with for months through back channels, stepped forward. But he didn't move toward me. He moved toward Robert. "I'm sorry, sir," Kevin said calmly, "but I don't take orders from you." Robert's face went purple. "What did you say?" "I said I don't take orders from you." Kevin gestured to 2 more security guards. "Gentlemen, please escort Mr. Huntington to the FBI agents. He's under arrest." "Under arrest?" Robert spun toward Agent Torres. "You can't arrest me. I haven't done anything." "Human trafficking," Torres said, stepping forward with handcuffs. "Wire fraud. Conspiracy to commit murder. We have 18 months of evidence, Mr. Huntington. Phone records, financial transactions, witness testimony. You're done." Robert's eyes darted to the exits. "I'm leaving. You have no authority to hold me." "Actually," I said quietly, "no one's leaving." Robert turned to me, his face contorted with rage. You think you can stop me. You're nobody. A broke little girl playing dress up in a world you don't belong in. I smiled. I pulled out my phone and typed a single word to Jennifer, now. 30 seconds later, a low alarm sounded throughout the resort. Metal gates began descending over the exits. Security guards moved to block every doorway. Guests panicked. What's happening? Why are the doors closing? I want to leave. Kevin's voice boomed over the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. By order of the resort ownership, this property is now under temporary lockdown as part of a federal investigation. No one will be harmed, but no one is permitted to leave until the FBI has completed their operation. Robert stared at the closing gates, then at Kevin, then at me. Ownership. His voice was barely audible. What are you talking about? I stepped closer to him, close enough that only he could hear me. I'm talking about the fact that I own this resort, Robert. 40% controlling interest. I've owned it for 2 years. You've been planning your son's wedding on my property, eating my food, drinking my champagne, threatening me in my lounge. His face went white. And now, I continued softly, you're going to be arrested on my terrace in front of 200 witnesses for crimes I've been documenting for 18 months. Robert's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Agent Torres stepped forward and snapped the handcuffs onto Robert's wrists. Robert Huntington, you're under arrest for human trafficking, wire fraud conspiracy to commit murder and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent. Torres continued reading the Miranda rights, but I stopped listening. I turned to face the crowd, 200 guests staring at me in shock. Savannah still on her knees, sobbing into her hands. Tyler standing awkwardly to the side. Noah gone. And every single person wondering the same thing. Who the hell was Olivia Sinclair? I took a breath. My name is Olivia Sinclair, I said, my voice carrying across the silent terrace. And I think it's time I introduced myself properly. If you're still here, please leave a comment to let me know you're still on the path to truth. I want to ask you if you were humiliated by your enemies as a loser and called trash by your own sister at your most vulnerable moment, what would you use to retaliate when you seem to have nothing? But the truth, can a poor man bring an entire powerful empire to its knees in an instant? The answer is about to be revealed, and it will send shivers down your spine. But please note the following events are highly dramatic and contain some fictional elements to enhance the suspense if you're not prepared for a brutal and shocking plot twist. You can stop the video right here. 200 faces stared at me in silence. I stood at the center of the terrace, still wearing the ugly brown dress Savannah had given me. Behind me, Agent Torres held Robert in handcuffs. To my left, Savannah knelt on the ground, sobbing. The gates were locked. No one could leave. I took a breath and spoke clearly, my voice carrying across the frozen crowd. My name is Olivia Sinclair. I am the CEO and sole heir of the Monarch Group, a private equity firm founded by my grandmother, Helena Fitzgerald, with a current portfolio value of $4.3 billion. Silence, then gasps, then an eruption of whispers. That's impossible, someone muttered. She's lying, someone else said. I pulled out my phone and held it up. On the screen, a scan of my corporate ID, my signature on Monarch Group letterhead, a Forbes article from 2023 listing me as one of the youngest female CEOs in private equity. I inherited the Monarch Group when my grandmother died in 2020. For the past 5 years, I have run the company while maintaining complete anonymity. No public appearances, no press interviews. No one outside my executive team knew my identity. I looked directly at Savannah, still kneeling on the ground. Not even my sister. Savannah's head snapped up, her eyes red and swollen. You're lying! Grandma left you nothing. The estate went to creditors. That's what I let you believe. I turned back to the crowd. The will was contested, yes, but not because there was no money, because there was too much. And Helena wanted to make sure it went to the right person. I walked slowly toward the altar, my heels clicking on stone. Helena Fitzgerald left her entire fortune to me, not Savannah, me. The will was very specific. She wrote, to my granddaughter, Olivia Sinclair, I leave the entirety of my estate, including all assets, properties, and controlling interest in the Monarch Group. She has earned this through loyalty, intelligence, and integrity qualities I have found absent in other members of this family. Savannah let out a strangled sob. I continued. For 5 years, I've kept my identity secret. I wore cheap clothes, lived in a modest apartment, let people think I was broke, and my sister. I looked at Savannah, took advantage of that. She found my grandmother's emergency fund account and stole $350,000 over 2 years. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. She used that money to fund this wedding. The Vera Wang dress she's wearing. $18,000 of stolen money. The champagne at the rehearsal dinner. $6,000. The flowers, the photographer, the private jet to Paris for engagement photos. All of it paid for with money she stole from me. I held up my phone again, showing bank records. 17 separate wire transfers across state lines. That's federal wire fraud, a felony punishable by up to 20 years in prison. Savannah's face went chalk white. Robert, still in handcuffs, let out a bitter laugh. You expect us to believe this, that you're some secret billionaire who's been playing poor for 5 years? It's absurd. Is it? I turned to face him. You believed I was poor Robert. You mocked me for wearing H&M dresses and Target shoes. You told me I was the last pathetic fragment of Helena's legacy. You threatened to make me disappear. I stepped closer to him. But the entire time I was watching you, documenting your crimes, feeding information to the FBI and positioning myself to destroy you. Robert's jaw clenched. You're nobody. You don't have the power, don't I? I smiled coldly. Let me tell you about power. Robert, 2 years ago, the Monarch Group quietly acquired a majority stake in the debt held by Huntington Corporation, your company. We now hold 60% of your outstanding loans, $217 million. Robert's face drained of color. That's right, I said softly. I'm your creditor. I own your debt. And the terms of those loans include a clause that allows me to call them in immediately if the borrower is convicted of a felony. I let that sink in. So when you're convicted of human trafficking, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder, and you will be convicted, Robert, because I have 18 months of evidence the Monarch Group will call in your loans, all of them, at once. Robert staggered even with Torres holding him upright. You can't. I can, and I will. Your company will be liquidated, your assets seized, your legacy destroyed, just like you tried to destroy my grandmother's 40 years ago. I turned to face the crowd again. Helena Fitzgerald was conned out of $58 million in 1985 by a man named Robert Hunt, Robert Huntington's alias. He took everything she had and disappeared, but Helena rebuilt. She spent 10 years clawing her way back to the top brick by brick, deal by deal. And before she died, she made me promise one thing. I paused, that I would make him pay. The terrace was completely silent. So for 2 years, I played the role Robert expected, the broke, struggling granddaughter, the girl who didn't matter. And while I played that role, I gathered evidence. I worked with the FBI to build a case against his human trafficking network. I positioned Monarch Group to control his debt. I waited for the perfect moment to spring the trap. I looked at Savannah, then at Robert. Today is that moment. Agent Torres stepped forward. Robert Huntington, you are under arrest for human trafficking, wire fraud conspiracy to commit murder, and money laundering. 2 more FBI agents emerged from the crowd and moved towards Savannah. Savannah Sinclair. One of them said, pulling out handcuffs, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud in the amount of $350,000 identity theft and conspiracy to commit murder. Savannah screamed. No, I didn't. This isn't Olivia. Please. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't hold her. The agents lifted her by the arms. Please. Savannah sobbed, looking at me with desperate red-rimmed eyes. I'm your sister. You can't do this to me. I'm pregnant. I'm having a baby. I know. My voice was ice. And that baby will be raised by her biological father, Tyler Brooks, who has legal standing for full custody. You, Savannah, are going to federal prison. The agents led her away, still sobbing, still begging. Robert in handcuffs turned to me one last time. You think you've won, but this isn't over. Yes, I said quietly, it is. Torres led him away. The crowd stood frozen, staring at me. I looked at my watch. 2:45 p.m. 15 minutes until the press release went live. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Jennifer. Release the statement now. Her reply came instantly. Done. It's live in 30 seconds. I looked up at the crowd. Half of them had their phones out recording. By tonight, this entire scene would be viral. By tomorrow, every news outlet in the world would be running the story. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice carrying across the terrace one last time. I apologize for the disruption to what should have been a joyful celebration. The lockdown will be lifted shortly. The FBI will take statements from anyone who wishes to provide one. In the meantime, the resort bar is open, and all drinks are on the house. A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd. I turned and walked toward the exit, my head high. Kevin, the head of security, opened the gate for me. Ms. Sinclair, he said quietly. That was incredible. Thank you, Kevin. I walked through the gate and down the hallway, leaving behind 200 shocked guests, 2 arrested criminals, and the ruins of a wedding that should never have happened. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Breaking secret billionaire CEO. Olivia Sinclair exposes sister's wedding fraud and takes down alleged crime boss at Colorado resort. I smiled. The world knew now, and there was no going back. I sat alone in the conference room staring at my phone. The news was everywhere. CNN, Forbes, Bloomberg. Secret billionaire exposes wedding fraud. My face next to headlines about Robert's arrest. A knock at the door. Come in. Noah Huntington stood in the doorway, still in his tuxedo, minus the jacket. Tie loose, eyes red. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. Can I talk to you? Of course, sit. He closed the door and sat heavily, hands clasped on the table. For a long moment, he said nothing. I don't know where to start, he said finally. Start anywhere. He looked up. Thank you. I blinked. For what? For saving my life. Savannah was going to kill me. My father was helping her. If you hadn't stopped the wedding, I'd be married to a woman planning my murder. Noah, no, let me finish. He took a shaky breath. I've spent 2 hours with the FBI. They showed me everything. The recordings, the texts, the plan to stage an accident on our honeymoon. My father's trafficking network. He ran a hand through his hair. My entire life is a lie. My father's a criminal. The woman I was going to marry was pregnant with another man's child, and the only person who cared enough to stop it was someone I barely knew. I leaned forward. I'm sorry it had to happen this way. You could have told me privately, but you didn't. You let me stand at that altar and get humiliated. Would you have believed me? He was silent. If I'd come to you a week ago and said, your fiancée is pregnant and your father is helping her plan your murder, would you have believed me? I don't know. You would have gone to your father. He would have convinced you I was lying, said I was jealous, unstable. And you would have believed him. Noah closed his eyes. You're right. I wouldn't have believed you. The only way to make you see the truth was to show you, with evidence you couldn't deny. It was brutal, but it was the only way. He nodded slowly. Doesn't make it hurt less. I know, I'm sorry. Silence. Can I ask you something? Noah said quietly. Of course. Did you know from the beginning, when we talked in the library, did you already know everything? I hesitated. Yes. He exhaled. So that conversation was real, I said firmly. I told you the truth about your father destroying my grandmother. I gave you the choice to decide what kind of man he was. And I chose wrong. You chose loyalty. That's not wrong. It's human. He looked at me. What do I do now? The FBI wants you to testify against your father. It's not required you're not implicated, but your testimony would be powerful. And if I don't, you walk away, start over. No one would blame you. Noah was quiet. Then, I want to testify. I sat back surprised. Are you sure? Yes, my father destroyed your grandmother. He was planning to let Savannah murder me. He's a monster. I'm not protecting him just because he's my blood. That takes courage. Or stupidity. He gave a weak smile. Probably both. I smiled back. They look the same from the outside. He laughed short, bitter, but genuine. What happens to Savannah? Federal prison. 5 to 10 years for wire fraud. More if they prove conspiracy. And the baby, Tyler Brooks gets full custody. He's the biological father. He wants to be in his daughter's life. Noah nodded. Good. The baby doesn't deserve a mother like that. Silence again. Why did you do all this? Noah asked. Why spend 2 years pretending to be someone you're not? I looked at him. Because justice isn't about making yourself feel better. It's about vindication. My grandmother spent 10 years rebuilding after your father destroyed her. She never got to see him pay, so I did it for her. And Savannah made her own choices. She stole. She lied. She planned murder. I just made sure she faced consequences. Noah nodded. You're a lot like your grandmother. I hope so. He stood adjusting his tie. Thank you, Olivia, for everything, for saving my life, for showing me the truth. You're welcome. He walked to the door, paused. What happens next for you? I go back to running my company. And for me, that's up to you, Noah. You get to decide who you want to be now. He nodded. Maybe I'll figure that out. You will. He left. I sat alone, the room silent. My phone buzzed. Jennifer, press conference scheduled tomorrow, 10 a.m. I replied, send the statement. Another text, Torres, both in custody, arraignment Monday, need you to testify. I'll be there. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, sunset painted the snow gold and pink. It was over. 2 years of planning. 2 years of pretending. 2 years of waiting. Justice. For Helena. For Noah. For everyone Robert and Savannah hurt. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, you did good, kid. Helena would be proud. Frank Murphy. I smiled and typed, thank you for everything. I walked out of the conference room. The resort was quiet. Most guests had left after giving FBI statements, but I wasn't ready to leave yet. I had one more thing to do. The conference wing had been transformed into a federal command center within hours. Metal folding tables replaced the elegant mahogany furniture. Laptops hummed. Agents moved like shadows between rooms. The mountain view through the floor-to-ceiling windows felt surreal against the fluorescent lights and the smell of stale coffee. I stood outside Interrogation Room A watching Robert Huntington through the one-way glass. He sat in a plastic chair, wrists cuffed to the table. His tuxedo was wrinkled now, the bow tie undone and hanging like a noose around his neck. But his posture remained defiant, shoulders back, jaw-tight eyes scanning the room as if calculating his next move. He's been quiet for 20 minutes, Agent Torres said beside me, waiting for his lawyer. He won't talk without one, I murmured. Doesn't matter. We have enough to hold him for 72 hours. After that, the grand jury indictment comes through. Torres glanced at me. You sure you want to be here for this? I nodded. I've waited 5 years. I'm not leaving now. Torres opened the door. I followed him inside. Robert's eyes locked onto mine immediately. For the first time since I'd known him, I saw something flicker behind the arrogant surprise. Maybe fear. You, he said slowly. His voice was hoarse. You're the one who set this up. I pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. Torres remained standing by the door, arms crossed. Mr. Huntington, I said calmly, I'm here as a witness and a creditor. The FBI has questions about your financial activities dating back to 1985. His jaw tightened. I'm not saying a word until my attorney arrives. That's your right. I opened the manila folder I'd brought with me and slid a document across the table. But I thought you might want to see this first. He glanced down. His face went pale. It was a photocopy of the original investment contract from 1985. $58 million. Helena Fitzgerald's signature at the bottom, elegant and trusting. And above it, in smaller print, the name of the shell corporation Robert had used to funnel the money offshore, Vanguard Alpine Holdings, LLC. That company doesn't exist anymore, I said quietly. You dissolved it in 1987, 2 years after my grandmother lost everything. But the bank records do exist. And so do the wire transfers, 14 separate transactions across state lines, all routed through accounts in the Cayman Islands and Prague. Robert's hands trembled slightly. He clenched them into fists. The FBI has been investigating you for 18 months, I continued. Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, human trafficking. I leaned forward. You thought you were untouchable. You thought the Fitzgerald family was gone. But you made one mistake, Mr. Huntington." "What mistake?" he growled. "You underestimated the girl in the Target dress." His eyes burned with rage. "You little—" "Careful," Torres said from the doorway, his voice cold. "Threatening a federal witness is another charge." Robert closed his mouth, but his breathing was heavy, ragged. I pulled out another document, the deed to the Alpine Majesty Resort. "This property was built on land my grandmother owned. You bought it from the bank after she was forced into foreclosure. But what you didn't know was that the original mortgage had a reversion clause. If the debt was paid in full within 20 years, ownership rights transferred back to the Fitzgerald estate." Robert stared at the paper. "That's impossible. The statute of limitations was frozen." I interrupted, "Because the fraud was never reported. My grandmother didn't have the resources to fight you in court, but I do." I tapped the document. "The Monarch Group paid off the mortgage in 2003, every dollar. We've owned the reversionary interest for 22 years. You've been paying rent to me, Mr. Huntington." "You just didn't know it." His face turned red. "You can't, this is legal." I smiled coldly. "Completely. You can ask your attorney when he arrives." Robert slumped back in his chair. For the first time, he looked old, beaten. I stood up. "You destroyed my grandmother's life because you thought she was weak. You tried to destroy mine because you thought I was poor. But the truth is, you were never the predator, Mr. Huntington. You were always the prey." I turned to leave. "Wait." I paused at the door. Robert's voice was barely a whisper. "What do you want?" I looked back at him. "Justice. That's all I've ever wanted." Torres opened the door for me. I stepped into the hallway, my heart pounding. Interrogation room B was smaller. The lights were dimmer. Savannah sat at the table, her Vera Wang gown crumpled and stained with mascara. Her hands were cuffed in front of her, and she was crying soft, broken sobs that shook her shoulders. Agent Davis, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a kind voice, sat across from her. She looked up when I entered. "Miss Sinclair is here," Davis said gently. Savannah's head snapped up. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Olivia," she choked out. "Olivia, please." I sat down slowly. My chest felt tight. "Please," Savannah whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You stole $350,000 from me," I said quietly. "You used it to fund a wedding to a man you were planning to murder." "No," Savannah shook her head violently. "No, I wasn't. I would never." "Agent Torres has recordings," I said. "Phone calls, text messages, you and Robert discussing the plan. Marry Noah, get into the will, stage an accident." Savannah's face crumpled. "I was scared," she sobbed. "Robert said if I didn't do it, he'd hurt Tyler. He'd hurt the baby." I felt something twist inside me. "You could have come to me." "How?" she cried. "You disappeared. You left. I thought you didn't care." "I cared," I said, my voice breaking. "I've always cared, but you chose him over me. You chose money over family." Savannah stared at me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm pregnant, Olivia. I'm 6 months pregnant. What's going to happen to my baby?" I looked at Agent Davis. She nodded slightly. "Tyler will have custody," I said. "He signed an agreement. The baby will be safe." Savannah let out a wail. "Please, please don't let them take my baby." I stood up. My hands were shaking. "You made your choices, Savannah. Now you have to live with them." I walked to the door. "Olivia." I stopped, didn't turn around. "I loved you," Savannah whispered. "You were my sister. I loved you." I closed my eyes. "I know." And then I left. The conference room felt too quiet after the chaos of the afternoon. Outside, the sun had set behind the mountains, leaving the sky a deep bruise of purple and gold. Inside, it was just me, Agent Torres, and a single manila folder on the table. I'd been staring at it for 10 minutes. "You don't have to do this," Torres said gently. He sat across from me. His tie loosened exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes. "Savannah committed federal crimes, wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit murder. She's looking at 10 to 15 years minimum, even with a plea deal." I didn't look up. "What about the baby?" Torres sighed. Tyler Brooks has agreed to take full custody. He's filed for emergency guardianship. If Savannah's convicted, the child will go to him immediately after birth. And if I press charges, then Savannah serves her time. The baby grows up knowing his mother is in prison. Torres leaned forward. But if you withdraw the civil suit and agree to a reduced federal charge, say accessory, after the fact instead of conspiracy, she might get 5 years. Maybe less with good behavior. I closed my eyes. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head, soft and steady. Mercy isn't weakness, Olivia. Sometimes it's the hardest kind of strength. But mercy felt impossible right now. Savannah had stolen from me, lied to me, tried to destroy me. She'd allied herself with the man who'd ruined my family and planned to murder an innocent person for money. And yet, she was still my sister. What does she have to offer? I asked quietly. Torres opened the folder and slid a document across the table. Full testimony against Robert Huntington. She has recordings we don't, text messages, bank records showing payments Robert made to her over the last 3 years, $240,000 in total. She can place him at the scene of multiple trafficking operations. She can tie him directly to the 1985 fraud. I scanned the document. My hands trembled slightly. Why would she do this? Robert's the father of her her co-conspirator. She's scared, Torres said bluntly. Robert turned on her the moment things fell apart, called her stupid, told security to throw her out. She knows he won't protect her now, and she's terrified of losing her baby. I looked up. She should be. Torres didn't flinch. I'm not asking you to forgive her, Olivia. I'm asking you to think about what justice really looks like here. You've already won. Robert's going to prison for the rest of his life. The Huntington empire is collapsing. You've reclaimed your family's legacy. He paused. But if Savannah testifies, we can guarantee Robert never walks free. Without her, his lawyers might find a loophole. They might get him a reduced sentence. They might even get him extradited to a country without an extradition treaty. I felt something cold settle in my chest. You're saying you need her. Yes. I stared at the document for a long moment. Then I picked up the pen. What are the terms? I asked. Torres exhaled slowly. You withdraw the civil suit for the $350,000. Savannah pleads guilty to accessory after the fact and identity theft, 5 years eligible for parole in 3. She testifies against Robert in exchange for witness protection and a sealed record after she serves her time. Tyler gets full custody. Savannah gets supervised visitation rights once she's released contingent on a psych evaluation and parenting classes. And the baby stays with Tyler. If Savannah completes her sentence and meets all the conditions, she can petition for joint custody. But Tyler has final say. I closed my eyes. Mercy, justice. The line between them had never felt thinner. I want one more condition, I said. Torres raised an eyebrow. What? Savannah writes a letter to the baby, a real one, explaining what she did and why, explaining that she's sorry, and she gives it to Tyler to hold until the child is 18. I looked up. I don't want that child growing up thinking his mother abandoned him. I want him to know the truth that she made terrible choices, but she loved him enough to try to make things right. Torres studied me for a moment, then he nodded. I can arrange that. I signed the document. 20 minutes later, I stood outside interrogation room B again. Agent Davis opened the door for me. Savannah looked up, her face pale and tear-streaked. Olivia, she whispered. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me. Savannah's hands were still cuffed, resting on the table. Her Vera Wang gown was ruined now, the lace torn at the hem, the silk stained with makeup and sweat. She looked nothing like the radiant bride from this afternoon. She looked like a stranger. I'm withdrawing the civil suit, I said quietly. Savannah blinked. What? If you testify against Robert, if you plead guilty to accessory and identity theft, if you agree to give Tyler full custody and complete your sentence without appealing. I sat down across from her. Then I'll drop the charges for the money you stole. Savannah stared at me. Why? Because you're pregnant, I said. And because that baby didn't ask to be born into this mess, he deserves a chance, and so do you if you're willing to earn it. Savannah's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve this. No. I agreed. You don't. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for him, and for Tyler, and for the family we used to be before everything fell apart. Savannah sobbed. I'm so sorry, Olivia. I'm so sorry. I looked at her for a long moment. There was a time when those words would have been enough, when I would have forgiven her, held her promised everything would be okay. But that time was gone. You'll write a letter to your son, I said. You'll tell him the truth. You'll explain what you did and why, and you'll tell him that you're trying to be better. And when he turns 18, Tyler will give it to him. That's the deal. Savannah nodded frantically. Yes, I'll do it. I'll do anything. I stood up. Agent Torres will have the paperwork ready in the morning. You'll sign it. You'll testify, and you'll serve your time. And if you complete all of that, if you really change, then maybe someday you'll get to be a mother to that little boy. I turned toward the door. Olivia, Savannah called out, her voice breaking. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I paused my hand on the doorknob. I didn't turn around. I don't know, I said honestly, but I hope you'll forgive yourself. And then I left. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the girl who'd been thrown out of this ballroom 3 days ago. I adjusted the collar of my navy Armani suit, tailored sharp, and worth more than Savannah's entire wedding budget. My hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon. Diamond studs glinted at my ears, small but flawless. No more Target dresses. No more pretending. 2 minutes, Ms. Sinclair, Jennifer Cole said behind me. My executive assistant stood with her tablet in hand, perfectly composed in a charcoal pencil skirt and crisp white blouse. She'd flown in from New York last night the moment I'd called. 3 years working together, and she'd never seen me rattled. She wasn't going to start now. How many outlets, I asked, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from my lapel. 217 confirmed, Jennifer replied. CNN, Bloomberg, Forbes, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, BBC, Al Jazeera, plus local Colorado stations and independent journalists. We've had to turn away another 100. The ballroom's at capacity. I took a slow breath. My heart was steady. My hands didn't shake. This was it. The moment 5 years of planning had built toward. Agent Torres, I asked. Standing by. He'll confirm the charges after your statement. Jennifer glanced at her watch. 90 seconds. I turned from the mirror and met her eyes. Thank you, Jen. She smiled, brief, professional, but warm. Go show them who you are, Olivia. I stepped out of the holding room and into the corridor. The sound hit me immediately, the low hum of 200 voices, the click and whir of cameras being prepped, the rustle of notepads, and the glow of recording lights. The double doors to the grand ballroom stood before me, flanked by 2 FBI agents in dark suits. They nodded as I approached. Ready, Miss Sinclair? One of them asked. Yes. They opened the doors. The noise swelled like a wave. Flashbulbs exploded. Reporters stood shouting questions before I'd even crossed the threshold. The ballroom, the same space where Savannah had humiliated me, where I'd been called a charity case, was now a sea of cameras and microphones and hungry, curious faces. A podium stood at the front, positioned in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. Beyond the glass, the Colorado Rockies rose in stark white peaks against a brilliant blue sky. I walked toward it. Every step was measured, confident. I didn't look at the reporters, didn't acknowledge the shouted questions. I kept my eyes on the podium, on the microphone, on the future I'd fought for. When I reached the stage, I placed my hands on the smooth wood and looked out at the crowd. Silence fell sharp and sudden. Good morning, I said. My voice was clear, steady, amplified by the microphone. My name is Olivia Sinclair, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Monarch Group. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled frantically. A few shouted follow-up questions, but I raised a hand and they quieted again. 3 days ago, I continued. I stood in this ballroom and watched my sister marry into a family built on fraud, exploitation, and violence. I stood here as an outsider, a woman in a cheap dress, dismissed as poor, irrelevant, and powerless. I paused, letting the weight of those words settle. But I was never powerless. I was waiting. Another wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw a journalist from Bloomberg lean forward, pen poised. "For 5 years, I have operated in secrecy," I said. "I built the Monarch Group from the ground up using the inheritance my grandmother Helena Fitzgerald left to me before her death. That inheritance wasn't money, it was a challenge. She told me that our family's legacy had been stolen, and she trusted me to take it back." I glanced at the mountain view behind me, then back at the crowd. In 1985, my grandmother invested $58 million in a luxury resort project led by Robert Huntington. That project never existed, Mr. Huntington used a shell corporation to funnel her money offshore, leaving her bankrupt and broken. She spent the next 10 years rebuilding her life from nothing, but she never forgot, and she made sure I wouldn't either. A reporter from CNN stood. "Ms. Sinclair, are you saying Robert Huntington is responsible for defrauding your grandmother?" "Yes," I said simply. "The FBI has been investigating Mr. Huntington for 18 months with my full cooperation. Yesterday, he was arrested on charges of wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and human trafficking. Agent David Torres of the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is here to confirm those charges." Torres stepped forward from the side of the stage, his badge visible on his belt. "The investigation into Robert Huntington and his associates is ongoing," he said into a second microphone. "But I can confirm that Ms. Sinclair has been an invaluable witness and partner in this operation. The evidence she provided was instrumental in securing the arrest warrants." The room exploded with questions again. I waited. "Miss Sinclair, what happens to the Alpine Majesty Resort now?" a woman from Forbes called out. I allowed myself a small smile. This resort was built on land my grandmother once owned. Due to a reversion clause in the original mortgage, the Monarch Group reclaimed ownership rights in 2003. As of today, I am formally announcing that the Monarch Group holds a 40% controlling interest in this property. Gasps, more flashes. Additionally, I continued, the Monarch Group holds 60% of Huntington Corporation's outstanding debt, approximately $217 million. If Mr. Yisri Huntington is convicted, those assets will be liquidated, and the proceeds will be used to establish a victim restitution fund and a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting survivors of human trafficking. The applause started slowly, then built genuine, respectful, almost awed. I waited for it to fade. "My grandmother taught me that wealth isn't just money," I said quietly. "It's responsibility. It's legacy. It's using your power to create something better than what you inherited." I looked directly into the CNN camera. Helena Fitzgerald's story doesn't end with her loss. It ends with justice, and that justice starts today. I stepped back from the podium. The crowd erupted, questions, applause, the chaos of 200 people trying to capture the moment. Jennifer appeared at my side, guiding me toward the exit. But as I reached the doors, I glanced back. At the far end of the ballroom, half hidden behind a pillar, stood Noah Huntington. He wasn't clapping, wasn't shouting. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read, grief, maybe, or respect. Our eyes met. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt something other than anger. I felt free. The wind at the summit cut clean and cold, carrying the scent of pine and snow. I stood alone at the edge of the overlook, hands buried in my coat pockets, watching Vale spread out far below. The resort I now owned. The legacy I'd reclaimed. The future I'd fought 5 years to build. But up here, none of that mattered. Up here, there was only sky and mountains and silence. I'd come to this spot 3 years ago wearing a secondhand parka, wondering if my grandmother's plan would ever work. Back then, the cold had felt unbearable. Now it felt like peace. The crunch of boots on snow broke the silence behind me. "I thought I'd find you here," Noah said quietly. I glanced over my shoulder. He stood a few feet away, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, dark hair tousled by the wind. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, but he was here. "How did you know?" I asked. He stepped closer. "You mentioned it once. You said this was the only place in Vale where you could breathe. I didn't remember saying that, but it was true. Noah stopped beside me close enough that I could feel his warmth, but not close enough to touch. For a moment, we just stood there looking out at the mountains. "That was some press conference," he said finally. I almost smiled. "I've been practicing that speech for 2 years. It showed." He paused. "You destroyed him, Olivia, my father. You took everything he built and burned it to the ground." "Yes," I said simply. Noah exhaled slowly. "I should hate you for that." I turned to face him. "Do you—" He met my eyes. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he shook his head. "No, I don't." His voice was raw. "I hate that I didn't see it. I hate that I almost married someone who was planning to kill me. But you—" He looked away. "You saved me, even if it hurt." Something in my chest loosened. "I didn't do it for you." "I know." He smiled faintly. "You did it for her. For Helena." He was quiet. "But you still could have let me walk into that trap. And you didn't." "I couldn't," I said softly. "You didn't deserve that." Noah turned back to me. "What happens now to us, I mean? If there even is an us." I looked at him, really looked at him. Noah Huntington, the man whose father had destroyed my family. The man who'd been lied to, manipulated, nearly murdered. He wasn't a villain. He wasn't a hero. He was just human, broken like me. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I spent 5 years planning revenge. I didn't plan for what comes after." "Neither did I." He hesitated. "But I'd like to figure it out, if you're willing." I studied his face. There was no expectation there, just quiet hope. "I'm not promising anything," I said. "I'm not asking you to. And I'm not the girl you thought I was. I'm not poor. I'm not powerless." "I know," Noah interrupted gently. "You're Olivia Sinclair, CEO of the Monarch Group, the woman who took down a crime empire." He smiled. "That's exactly who I want to know." I felt something shift in my chest. Not love, not yet, but possibility. The fragile hope that maybe I didn't have to carry this alone anymore. "No lies," I said. "If we do this, whatever this is, no more lies." "No more lies," Noah agreed. He held out his hand. I looked at it for a moment, then I took it. His palm was warm against mine, steady, real. We stood there, hands clasped, the wind pulling at our hair and the world stretching out below us. And for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was just thinking about the man beside me, the mountain beneath my feet, the sky overhead. "Thank you," Noah said quietly, "for telling the truth, even when it hurt." I squeezed his hand once, then let go. "That's what justice is. It's not revenge. It's truth." Noah nodded, then he stepped back. "I should let you have this moment. You've earned it." "Where will you go?" I asked. "I don't know yet." He glanced at the town below. "Somewhere far from all of this. Somewhere I can figure out who I am without my father's name." He looked at me. "But I'll be back when you're ready." "How?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Noah turned and walked back down the trail, his footsteps fading into the snow. I stood alone again, the wind cold against my face, the sun descending behind the peaks. Below me, Vale glittered the resort, the town, the empire my grandmother had built and lost, and that I had reclaimed. Justice had been served. The Fitzgerald name was no longer a cautionary tale. It was a legacy, a promise, a fire that had been smothered for 40 years, now burning brighter than ever. I closed my eyes and let the wind carry away the last of my anger, my grief, my fear. When I opened them again, the world felt lighter, free. My grandmother had taught me that wealth wasn't just money. It was responsibility. It was legacy. It was the choice to rise from the ashes and build something better. And I had risen. The name Fitzgerald would never be ash again. It would be fire, relentless, unyielding, impossible to extinguish. I turned away from the overlook and started down the mountain. The future was waiting, and this time I was ready. And to you listening to this story, remember this family revenge is a fire that burns both ways. I stood on that mountain believing I'd won, but God saw what I couldn't, that every step toward vengeance pulled me further from who I was meant to be. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any blade. When Savannah stole from me, I thought destruction was the only answer. but God reminded me through Noah that family betrayal doesn't have to define us. Forgiveness is always possible. Here's what I learned too late. Family revenge never heals the wounds family betrayal creates. It only makes them deeper. If I could go back, I wouldn't have spent 5 years planning someone's downfall. I would have trusted God's justice instead of demanding my own. Don't be like me. Don't let bitterness poison your soul. Don't let family betrayal turn you into someone unrecognizable. God sees every wrong, and His justice is perfect even when ours isn't. My grandmother used to say, "The Lord is a God of justice." I wish I'd listened sooner. So I'll ask you, do you want to be the ash or the fire? Because family revenge will always leave you burned. If this story spoke to you, leave a comment and share it with someone who needs this message. Hit subscribe for more stories that challenge and inspire. Thank you for staying until the end. Just a heads up, the stories ahead contain fictional elements created for educational purposes. If that's not for you, feel free to explore other content. But if you're ready for more truth wrapped in story, I'll see you next time.